Hello and welcome to the July edition of the 2023 Microsoft Excel Collegiate Challenge. My name is David Brown. I'm an Associate Professor of Finance at the University of Arizona, and today I'm going to be introducing you to the Speed Challenge case that introduces you to Excel Esports. So this case is built to be done quickly. I'm going to show you ways to do this in a series of steps, but also ways that you can complete all of these challenges in one single formula that'll save you time, but does add some complexities. So we'll be talking about some Excel features that may be new to you, some interesting syntax, and a number of ways to solve problems. So let's get to it. All right, first a few housekeeping things. You'll start out with this instructions tab. You can read through that in more detail, but one important thing to remember is that you're going to want to both enable macros and also unblock the macro security. So if you haven't done that before, here's a guide to that on the Unblock Guide tab. All right, so once you're done with that, you get to our main case tab. So in this case, you'll see that it has a number of levels. So as you scroll down, we start at level 1, which is very easy, and we go down progressively harder through levels 2, 3, etc., all the way until level 10. All right, so we're going to try to complete all those 10 levels. And now you can do this on your own without really timing yourself, but it is built with a timer. So we have this start time to temp button, which will let you time how long it takes you to get from level 1 through level 10, and part of the July challenge is going to be to get as low of a time as possible. So like I said, what I'll do in this walkthrough is show you different ways to do each level, from more clear, easy to follow ways to more complex ways that save you time and increase your speed. All right, so in the first level, what we need to do is sum all the 20 numbers in each game. All right, so we see the correct value for the example. We can always check that by doing a sum of all those 20 numbers, and we see our answer is 1045, which is exactly what the given answer was. So we know that's the formula we want to use. So now we can use that, just sum, select all 20 numbers, and here I'm using Control-Shift right arrow key to highlight all that. And then I'm going to do just Shift and hold it down a little while, and then Control-D to fill that formula all the way down. So in level 1, really what you want to take away from this is just some quick keyboarding tricks, right? Making sure you're using Control and Shift with the arrow keys, and also giving you Control Shift and Control D to fill down a formula. Now you could instead use the classic kind of Control Copy and then highlight and Control V to paste. So Control C then Control V, and that'll work too. Control D is just a little bit quicker. All right, let's go on to level 2. So in level 2, we're going to sum 20 numbers. We're just going to always sum the 20 numbers from the example row that are here in row 40, and we're going to add it to the value of x. So each level has a different value of x, which is sitting here in cell in column G. All right, so if we want to do this, 1121 is our check value, so let's just set this up again in here. So we'll sum all of the values, and now I'm going to hit the F4 key. The F4 is going to put the dollar signs around it and create an absolute reference. That way when we copy the cells down, they will not change. And now we're going to add that to, or sum up with, the value x. Now this one we don't want to use F4. If we used F4, it wouldn't slide down as we moved our formula down, but we want it to do that because each game is going to have a different x value. All right, so let's hit enter. So we get 1121, which was our check value, so now we can copy that. And this time, I'm going to actually select this whole column over here. I'm going to hit Shift to go right arrow, and then Shift Tab right arrow one more time to move off that first row. And now I can go ahead and paste those values. So first level I used Control D. Here I'm using Control Shift and even Shift Tab to move around to do that selection. All right, and we got all of our answers. Notice that you'll get these green check arrows as soon as your answers are correct. All right, moving down to level 3. Now we want to count the odd numbers in each of the sets of 20 numbers. All right, so this is one that is more natural to do, kind of operating on each cell. And here it helps to know a couple formulas. So in this case, I'm going to use the is-odd formula. And let's just see what that does. So if we do an is-odd on I61, well, it gives us a true. All right? So if I'm going to count these, if I just want to count true, there's not a good way to count true versus false. But we can count ones versus zeros. Or we could add up ones and zeros. So if we add up all the ones, then that's actually going to give us the total number, or the count of how many are actually odd or even in a set of numbers. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this is-odd function. I'm going to say if is-odd I61. So if that's true, it'll give me a 1. Otherwise, a 0. All right, now we need to do this for all 20 numbers. So what I'm going to do is just lay out with the sequence function the numbers 1 through 20. And what that does for me, it allows me to go to the very end and then keyboard back, Control-Shift left arrow, and then Control-R to fill that across. All right, so now that I have all the numbers, ones for things that are odd, zeros for things that are even, I can go over to my answer and I can say sum that whole array that I built, and I get the answer of 8. And we can see that that answer is correct. We got our green check arrow. We could also copy this all up one level if we want to check the example. So if we copy our formula up here and then copy this formula up, we see that we still get 15. All right, so we got a couple different ways to check our work. We can now copy this down, up, and we see we didn't get the right answers because we haven't copied down over here. So we have to get all of our helper cells and copy those down as well. All right, so we got all the right answers, but we had to use all those extra helper cells to the right, which does take quite a bit more time. So is there a way we can do this more effectively? The answer is yes. Effectively, we want to create this array of zeros and ones that we see over here. We want to create that within the cell itself, all right, within the formula rather. All right, so the way we can do that is we're going to do sum, and we're going to do a couple special things here. First, I'm going to do minus minus. All right, what minus minus does is it takes a true false statement and it turns it into ones and zeros. All right, so that's what's going to operate here. And then I'm going to say is odd, right? This is the function we've already used. And now I can give it this entire array to work with. All right, so when functions work on arrays, it basically does that calculation of is this odd, true or false, and it does it for every element in that array or that range of cells that we're using. All right, so if we do this and we hit enter, well, we see a value error. And that's because some functions work well with arrays, others don't. But thankfully, there's a little trick here. For these functions like is odd or is even that don't kind of play nicely with arrays, if we put a plus out front, that's going to correct it for us. So now we have one formula, it's pretty short and easy, that we can copy down and still get all the right answers. And to show you that we're not using the helper cells, let's come over here and we'll delete all the helper cells, and notice we still get our right answers. Except that first one, but let's go ahead and get our check value right, and we still get our 15 up there. All right, so that's a way to do this level a little bit more quickly, all in one cell. And again, the key pieces were that we needed this minus minus to convert true and false to ones and zeros. That way we can add them up. And we needed to use an array inside of is odd with a plus out front. And again, when you're using different kind of arrays inside of functions, sometimes they're going to work, sometimes they're not. If they don't, try this plus trick and it'll usually work for you. All right, let's look at the next level, level 4. So if we scroll down to level 4, we see sum the odd numbers in the set of 20 numbers. All right, so last level we just counted how many odd numbers there were. Now we want to sum them. And so here, let's actually approach it kind of the same way we did last time. So I'm going to do a sequence 1 to 20 to lay this out. We're going to do our if is odd. So we're, again, approaching it the same way, doing it cell by cell rather than all in one formula. And we'll get to the all in one formula in a second. All right, so I got my ones and zeros. Let's copy that down. And now I have ones for all the even numbers. Sorry, for all the odd numbers. All right, now what we want to do is add up the ones where there's a 1 corresponding to it. Now in this case, there is a nice formula for this, and it is the sum product. All right, so the way sum product works is it takes one array in, so our actual numbers we're working, and it multiplies each element of that array by the corresponding element in another array. All right, so we've got our 2 arrays lined up here. So it's going to multiply 33 by 1, and then add that to 28 times 0. Since 28 times 0 is 0, it's going to ignore all the even numbers, and it's only going to add up the odd numbers as a result. So if we hit enter, we should get the right answer. Let's go ahead and actually copy up for our check values to make sure that works. We'll scroll over, 757 is our check, and we still have that 757. So now we should be able to just copy that down and get all of our correct answers for this level. All right, so again, how do we do this without the helper cells though? All right, so let's get rid of our helper cells so we don't have them to help us. And let's get rid of our answers. And now we're going to use basically that sum product again. We're just going to use it based on the function we'd already built. All right, so we already have our isodd working. So let's just copy that function, and we'll do it here in the check value. And we're going to change the sum to sum product. And now the only other thing we have to do is multiply that array we've already selected by our array of values. And notice here, I actually want to make sure these arrays align. So let's just pull this blue array all the way down with the red array. And now I get my 757. And now if I take that same function, paste it down, then I see we've got all the same answers. We just didn't need our helper cells out here on the right anymore. All right, so that got us through the first 4 levels. This last level was hard, right? You're having to use sum product. You're using the minus minus. You're using isodd with the plus inside with an array. But it is a way to do these formulas fairly quickly and compactly rather than having to build out the extra helper cells. All right, let's keep going. So level 5, we get to a little easier one. Find the largest number in a set of 20 numbers. All right, if you're not familiar with it, there's a function called max. All right, maximum gives you the biggest number in a set of numbers. In this case, the array that we're working with. So max in that first row or that first game is 96. If we copy this formula to our example, we see 93. So it was the same value we had before we replaced it. Now we should be able to copy this down, and we get all of our correct answers. All right, so max lets you get the biggest number. Min would let you get the smallest number. All right, so that's an easy level. This next level 6 is medium. All right, why is it medium? Well, we're not looking for the biggest or the smallest number. In this case, I'm saying find the xth smallest number in a set of 20 numbers. So in this example, we want to find the 3rd smallest number. And if we just look across this data, what do we see that's small? We see 13, 9, 19, 15. So 13 is the smallest, then 15, then 19. So 19 is the 3rd smallest number, which is what the answer is giving us. All right, so this is just one where you have to know the function. So in this case, small is a function that if you give it an array, and then you tell it which smallest number do you want. In this case, it'll be the first smallest number because that's what x is. It'll give you the smallest number. So the smallest number in this first one is 15. If we copy that down, the 3rd smallest number in this set of data is 33. All right, we see 5, 9, and if we scan through, we see that, where is it? 33 is the next smallest number. All right, so we're going to get different values depending on which smallest number we want, which is where the x is changing as well in our formula. All right, so if we copy that down, right, we should see that we get all of our answers correct. So again, the small function is going to find the xth smallest item. If you want it on the other side, the large function will find the xth largest item in your data set. All right, now we're on to level 7. In this level, we're going to sum all the numbers that are less than or equal to the xth smallest number. So we're still going to use that small function we just learned, but now we're going to layer on a little bit more. And here I'm going to start with helper cells, and then we'll move away from the helper cells as we get there. All right, so the helper cells, let's first figure out what the xth smallest number is. So let's start out with small on our array, and we want which smallest item, in this case the 3rd smallest for the example, and we see 19 is the 3rd smallest number. So what we want to do now is sum up the numbers 19, 13, and 15. Those are going to be the 3 numbers that are less than or equal to 19. All right, so to do that, let's just set up our helper cells, and we're going to say if, and we'll say if a value, right, is less than or equal to our 3rd smallest value, and make sure you lock that. That way it moves, but we don't want to lock it entirely, right? We don't want it to move right or left, but we do want it to move up or down as we go down to other games. So in this case, we only want to lock the column, which is AD. So I'm going to hit F4 again, F4 one more time, and you see that you have the $sign on the AD and not on the 135. Right? So the column is locked, but the row is not. All right, so we got that set up. If that's the case, let's go ahead and just use our number. Otherwise, let's show a 0. All right, we're going to use sequence to see how far we have to go. 1, 20. Go to the end, pull our right out, and we should see in this array, sorry, I went too far, that we have the number 15, the number 13, and the number 19. So now we should be able to just sum these up. So if we go over to our answer cell, we say sum and we sum up that series of zeros and sometimes positive numbers, and we get 47. All right, I actually just forgot what the answer was, so let's just undo, Control Z. Yep, we see 47 was the correct answer. So we'll put that answer back in. And now as long as we copy all of that down, all right, all of our helper cells, we copy those down, we can come back and get our formula, copy it down as well, and we see we have our correct answers. All right, so everything's working. But again, we didn't do it in one cell. All right, so let's see how we can get rid of the helper cells and still do it. So we'll put 47 back in here. Let's come over here and get rid of all our helpers. All right, and let's see how we can do this in one step. And the idea here is we're going to use something called the filter function. All right, we saw this in a previous challenge as well, but it's basically going to take a set of data and make it smaller so we can work with it. And I'm going to show you how we do this in helper cells, but I'm going to eventually put it into one cell. So what I can do, and actually let's keep our small, so we'll just see how the steps get built up. So we'll use our small, comma 3. All right, so there's our small function. And now we can do our filter function to say, I want to filter this array, and I want to filter it as long as those numbers are less than or equal to that small function. All right, and let's see what we get. So what we can see is we have what's now called a spilled array or a dynamic array, right? It has 3 numbers in it because that's how many numbers are smaller than, less than or equal to 19. All right, if we copy this down now, let's copy it down, whoops. We can get rid of our number errors. So we don't need that line. And we can see that sometimes we're going to have 1, sometimes we're going to have 3, sometimes we're going to have 2. You can also actually end up in situations where you might have 4 or 5 numbers. And that's going to be if that third number occurs more than once. And that is going to happen in some cases, so make sure you watch out for that and build your formulas to account for it. In this dynamic array setting, it'll handle it for you all automatically. All right, so in this case, we can see how we have our numbers that are less than or equal to our target value, or that's x, the smallest value, all isolated and shown for us. So now, how do we wrap this into one formula? Well, we can put a sum around the filter. So now we copy that down, and now we just have the sum of those numbers. So it's automatically taking however many numbers were in that array, and it's adding them up. And then the last piece we need to do is put this small function in here rather than referencing it. So let's come back in and say small of our array. And we're going to make that with the input value over here of 1. All right. So now we have all of that without using any helper cells. All right. So we have our formula solved over here. Now we just need to get it over here. All right. So how can we do that? Let's copy it and just come over here and paste it. And we see we have a ref error. All right. The ref error, what is that? We're trying to reference cells that don't exist. And if we hit F2, we can see there are a bunch of refs in here. And it's because we're trying to reference an array that's to the left of where we're working, right? Because if we look at our formula here, the array is to the left of the cell, and there's no absolute referencing on it. So when we slide this cell from column AF all the way over to column E, it's now looking for columns that don't exist that would be like -A or something like that. All right, so because of that, we have to adapt for that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit F2 to get into this formula bar. I'm going to hit Control-A to select the entire formula, and then Control-C. Now I can go over to my formula, and I can just hit F2 to select the whole thing, Control-A to select it all, Control-V to paste. And I want my formatting to be nice, so let me just drop that up here. And now I have my formula transferred, and now I can copy it down. All right, so we have to be a little careful when we're moving formulas without absolute referencing in it. Because it will change, and so sometimes you just have to copy the formula directly rather than copying the cell and then pasting it. All right, level 8 is our next stop. Let's clean up a little bit of our helpers that we don't need. All right, in level 8, what it asks us to do now is concatenate the numbers less than or equal to the x smallest number in the set of 20 numbers. The order should be the same as the order given in the data. All right, so we saw the filter function and how that worked. So let's see that one more time. And I just deleted it. Let's just pull it back for us to make this a little bit quicker. So Control Z brought it back. Let's put it in here. So we have, there's our filter of putting those numbers together. So now we want to concatenate those. That means put them together. So if I use concat, the concatenate function, on that array, and notice I typed a hashtag at the end of the cell reference, that means it's going to capture everything it spills to. If I do that, now you can see it just puts that 15, 13, and 19 in order, all in one string. And that's where we have our answer value over here. All right, so all we really have to do on this level is take our answer from the previous level. So again, F2, Control All to copy all the formulas. I'm going to move it down here. Let's do it in the example. All right, we put it in there. I don't want the sum though. What I want is the concatenation. And in this case, there was 15. Let's see, I messed it up. So where did we go wrong? Let's look here. Oh, we didn't move our cells down. All right, so let's just make sure we move our cells down. Here we can just drag them. Oh, and I'm not even going to the right one. Let's go back up to the example. And there, we still don't have our answer right. Oh, I missed one. All right, so let's drag that back down, make sure everything aligns. Now we're working properly. All right, so we got our function. All we really had to do was replace the sum with the concat. So this actually becomes a pretty quick level when you know the trick and you know the formula and you've set it up properly in the level before. All right, the next level is actually very similar. Now, instead of concatenating them all together, we're just going to concatenate them together with a semicolon in between. And this could be a semicolon, a comma, a dash, whatever you want. And really what you just need to know is another formula. And this is actually a really new one in Excel, so I'm going to copy this down. So let's just start with our concatenate. And we'll do two of them here so we can see it a little better. And we can see our answer's right for the first one because it's just one number. But for the second one, it doesn't work anymore. So we can't use concat, but we can use is text join. All right, so this is, again, a new function. And what it does is it allows us to put a delimiter, right? That's just a fancy word for something that separates values into the concatenate function. All right, so we're basically telling it now to put a semicolon between each value. And let's see what we get. And that's exactly what we get here. Is it's going to put that semicolon in between each one. That way we can see our values separated out. And so this can be a way to just make it a little bit easier to see your data and look at what you're doing. Now I do want to show kind of how you could use helper cells to do this as well and show that text join is still going to work in that case. All right, so let's, again, copy some of our helper stuff here. So the first thing I want to get is just the numbers, or the third smallest number. And now we're going to do what we did earlier. We're going to say if that value is less than or equal to our helper, making sure we lock just the column, then give me the value. Otherwise, let's give me a 0. All right, and then we're going to do a sequence 1, 20. Make sure we get everything. Copy to the right. Went too far, and we actually didn't get any values. So let's figure out our error here. See if we scroll back, because we should. Oh, yeah, less than or equal looks okay. Well, we know the 15 should show up, so let's check that one. Oh, I didn't lock everything. All right, so this happens. Oh, and we don't want AD. We actually want I-173 in that case. All right, so let's try that. There we have our function working. All right, so now what if we want to text join all that? Let's just go out here on the end and do a text join on not a whole array now, but the first argument we have to remember is the delimiter that we want. So let's join all that up. And now you see you don't exactly get what you want, right? You have this big series, and let me move a little bit. We'll move it out to the right so we can see. You have this big series of zeros and then occasionally a number. All right, so if we want to fix that, well, one potential thing we can do is let's change these zeros to blanks. All right, and in this case, if we just have blanks, well, it turns out, if we copy that to the right, text join is smart enough to ignore those blanks. All right, so you still get that same answer that we would have gotten originally with the filter function being used, but now we get it by using the helper cells, which might be a little bit more straightforward approach, especially if you're not as comfortable using these dynamic arrays and functions built around them. All right, so you can do that both ways there, and that'll work just fine for you. All right, let's move on to level 10. This is the very hard level. And you'll see that we use a lot of the skills we've learned so far, and we combine them all in one step. All right, so we're going to sum the even numbers in this set of 20 that are less than or equal to the third smallest even number. All right, so we're using small. We can use filter again, but we'll show it kind of a long way as well. And so a lot of different techniques we're using here. So the first thing that we're going to do is get the set of even numbers, right? Because we got to get the third smallest even number. All right, so we'll do this long ways again. So we'll start out with our sequence 1, 20. And we're going to go, we'll just do an if is even now, right? We're going to use is even instead of is odd. If that's true, then give me, let's just go ahead and give me the number. Otherwise, give me a blank. All right. We're going to go all the way across, and there we can see our even numbers. All right. Now we want to get, and I'm going to scroll over a little bit, the third smallest number from that. All right. So we can use small on that array and comma 3. Now here we don't have to use an x, like an input value. I'm just saying do the third smallest one in this case. But you see we could replace this 3 with an input value if that were specified. All right, so in this case, the third smallest is 60. All right, now what we want to do is add up all the even numbers that are less than or equal to 60. So let's come back over here. We'll take our sequence, and we'll say equals if this value is less than or equal to this one, then give me that value. Otherwise, just give me a blank again. All right, so now we should see 3 values. All right, that looks good. So the last step then is we can just sum all those, and that should be our answer. Let's go check with our check value. So 144. All right, there's 144. So we can just do equals out to our 144. And now as long as we copy that down, all right, nothing works until we copy our helpers down. All right, we got all our helpers. We copy those down. We got a lot more than we needed, so let's just do a little cleanup. All right, we clean everything up, and we see we got all our answers correct. All right, so that's one way to do it. That might be a quick and efficient way for you. If you want to see how to do it in one cell, let's take a look at that now. So let's get rid of all our helper stuff. And this is going to be a pretty complicated one because we need a couple different steps, but you should learn some new techniques along the way. All right, so if we recall, 144 was our answer here. All right, so the first thing we had to do was figure out what the even numbers were. So we can use a filter for that. So let's start with filter. We're going to filter that array, and we're going to filter that array with the is even. All right, so if we do that, what we're going to get is an error message. And let's just see it. There's our value error, because again, is even is not going to take a value, an array, very nicely unless we put a plus in front of it. So let's put the plus out there. All right, so now we see those are our 5 even numbers. Now from that set, from that array, we want to get the third smallest number. All right, so if we want to get the third smallest of that, we can just wrap this in a small function. And that gives us the third smallest number of 60. All right, so we've eliminated kind of those first 2 steps. Now what we want in this last step is we want to know all the numbers in this set, in this array, that are both less than or equal to 60 and are even. So we have 2 conditions to apply to a filter. So let's put our filter out here. So we're going to filter this array. And if you want to filter on 2 conditions, you have to match them, basically put them in parentheses and multiply them together like this. So we have 2 empty conditions right now. This is just the way the syntax works for this filter function. All right, so we're going to fill in each of these conditions. The star here means an and. If you actually did a plus, it would mean an or. All right, so we want both to be true. It's an and. So let's put them in here. So we're going to say we want to know is even. All right, so we know they have to be even numbers, and we want to remember to put our plus out front. And the other thing we want is that those numbers are less than or equal to the value that we calculated there. All right, so let's just do that and make sure it's working. All right, we got our values. The last step then is to sum them. All right, so just wrap it with a sum function. and we get our 144 in one cell. However, it's not really one cell yet because we're still using this helper formula. So what can we do? Well, let's take this helper formula. Let's copy that, and we're going to put it in here where we had that reference to ID 192. So we can just put our formula directly in there. Now we don't need our helper, and we have our answer all in one formula. So like before, if I hit F2, Control A, Control C, I can copy that whole thing. Let's move all the way over here, F2, delete that, and paste my formula. And now I have a one-cell formula that just solved each of those levels. And again, this is a pretty complicated function. You know, we're using multiple filters, we're using small, we're using is even with this plus up here. So this is a big formula to try to digest, which is why this is a very hard level. But it does introduce you to a few concepts that might be useful down the road. And, you know, when you're looking at somebody else's model that has that plus, or if you see, you know, for example, that minus in front of something, now you know what that is. All right, so hopefully this has been helpful to give you some new tips and tricks. A few last things. As you complete this model, if you do the start timed attempt, you're going to notice a couple of things. First, all these numbers are going to change each time you start a new attempt. It's also going to clear out all your previous values and all your answers and the work that you've done. So be ready for that to all clear out and kind of give you a fresh start. The other things that's going to happen is when all your answers are correct, it'll tell you how long it took you to finish, and it'll take you over here to the timed results, and it'll actually record your time. And you can see all your results and kind of see how you progress from the first time through until you actually do it the last time and you're satisfied with your time. All right, so enjoy this month's challenge. We look forward to seeing how fast you can finish it. And we also look forward to seeing you for the rest of the challenges and hopefully here in Tucson in December for the finals of the Microsoft Excel Collegiate Challenge. Have a great one.